Hello, everybody. I am Evan Sandhaus. I am, as Bill mentioned, a very late addition to this panel, so I apologize if any of this feels less than fully polished. But this is an exciting day for me. Not only is it the IPTC's 50th anniversary, but it's the first time I've ever worn a three-piece suit in England, meaning that this is the very first day of my life I've ever worn a waistcoat. So that's exciting for me. Anyways. I am with the New York Times, and today I want to talk to you about the future of the past, to discuss with you some efforts that we've explored in the last year and a half or so to make a success of our archive. And I want to discuss really not just our efforts, although those will sort of be the illustrative examples, but rather a strategy that you as publishers, who I suspect, like the New York Times, have an extensive back catalog, can leverage to make a success of it in the 21st century. As I mentioned, I work for the New York Times. I'm presuming that everybody in this room is familiar with the New York Times. It is among the leading English language news publishers, and if you're not a subscriber, I strongly encourage you to be. Our archives are really cool. This is an article I just dug up about the International Civil Engineer Society, whose building we are currently in. They were quoted in this 1913 article, which with beautiful graphics proposed that we should build a tunnel from France to England under the English Channel. So, a lot of the ideas that we discuss have been around for a while. So, me personally, I am a technical director in the New York Times Technology Operations Organization. I have oversight of the teams that do search, tagging and taxonomy, search engine optimization, comments and community, and most importantly, for the purposes of this presentation, archives. And I've been thinking a lot about archives in the last several years, given the role that I occupy, and it occurred to me that our relationship to the past has changed through the sort of twin revolutions in telecommunications technology and audiences. We really don't relate to the past the same way we used to. This is how we used to relate to the past, which is to say that we relied on editors to take our back catalogs, create an expert distillation of them, and then market that package to consumers, because there wasn't enough bandwidth to deliver to you the entire back catalog. So instead of settling for the complete catalog of the Scorpions, you were instead forced to settle for the best hits album, which was 12 songs and 57 minutes long. The New York Times did something similar. We created sort of greatest hits packages of our own archival content. This is the greatest hits between 1851 and 2002 of our front pages. This is our complete coverage of World War II, our greatest hits, or actually our complete, forgive me, coverage of the Civil War. But now, because the limitations on bandwidth and marketing channels have sort of gone away for archival content, it's completely changed the way that we can relate to our past. Whereas previously you had to settle for the greatest hits album, now if you are so inclined, you can go on to Spotify and spend 24 hours and 56 minutes listening to all of the 334 songs the Scorpions have released. And taking one step back from that, you can listen to, over the course of 115 years, if you have the time, all 20 million songs in Spotify's catalog, which, to be honest, represents probably a fairly large chunk of human musical output in the 20th century. But not Taylor Swift. So what can we as a publishing industry learn from the experience of other analogous industries and how they've had to monetize their back catalog? Well, at the New York Times, we faced this very challenge. I'm sorry, I have to do a quick little AV thing here. I meant to turn off mirroring so I could see my notes. But in my excitement of speaking to you, I forgot to do that. Yes. All right, so I'm getting to a point where I'll be able to see my notes. I'm sorry, this is all very exciting for you as an audience. I apologize. All right. All right, fantastic. So we faced the problem not of a giant pile of records, but of a large pile of newspapers that we wanted to create value from for our audience. And when we started thinking about it, like how can we create value for our audience from this? What does it take for to make a success of your back catalog? We really, through the experience we had putting our archives online, came to believe that a successful archive strategy really involves three pillars. First is distribution. Creating a compelling channel to deliver that archival content to your customers through. The second is discovery. You have to provide your customers with a good mechanism for finding the things that interest them in your archives. And lastly, curation. Although it is very cool that you've given them the entire catalog of music, or in our case, the entire back catalog of the New York Times, you still need to find some of the good stuff on a regular basis for your customer set so that they can really appreciate the value that your archive brings. Now, in the specific instance of the New York Times archive, we came up with a technology to handle the distribution question. That technology is called Times Machine. I will describe it in just a second. To handle the discovery question, we leveraged 164 years of metadata practices within our organization to build a search that lets you really leverage the institution's knowledge of its archive so that you can find cool stuff. And in terms of curation, we thought a fun, interesting, and 21st century way of surfacing relevant bits of our archive to a large audience would be to start an archive Twitter account. So we started NYT Archive about a year ago. We're up to about 50,000 followers. It's all very exciting. But first, before I describe exactly what we've done to bring our archive to a broader audience, I want to tell you just a little bit about the archive. This is the New York Times archive. Actually, this is the front 2 pages of the very first edition of the New York Times. You can probably see 2 very important things that we've changed. One, it's no longer the New York Daily Times. It's just the New York Times. And also, there's no hyphen between New and York. Other than that, indistinguishable from what we publish today. So the archive consists of roughly 59,000 issues. And internally, when we think about the archive at the New York Times, we think about it in sort of 2 very large tranches, the deep archive and the modern archive. The difference between the two is that from 1981 forwards, the New York Times decided it made sense to persist the digital copies of the newspaper data that we had around. So from 1981 forward, we have the full digital text of every article that we've published. Prior to 1981, we do not have the full text. So presenting our archive in that time period online for our users wasn't just a challenge of let's take old text and put it into a new web template. It was a challenge of how can we actually take the physical newspaper and make that the thing that people have access to in a compelling way through their browsers and on mobile devices. So that deep archive is where we had to really focus this effort. And that deep archive consists of about 46,000 issues. Published across 2.4 million pages, consisting of about 11.2 million articles. So the good news is we didn't have nothing to go on for this deep archive. Of course, for the deep archive, we have the scans of every paper, every page in every paper between 1851 and 1981. We also have information about the physical geometry of those pages. We know where the articles occur on the pages. We also have the headline, the lead paragraph, and what we affectionately call dirty ASCII. And what that is text derived from the pages through an optical character recognition process that, as you can see, is suitable for doing search over, but not suitable for display. It's riddled with errors, and we're at the New York Times. We don't put errors online. So we also have indexing metadata, about which I will say more later. So now that you've met the archive, let me tell you about what we did to put this archive online in a way that makes it accessible. And I can think of no better way of talking about how we put the archive on line than to introduce you to a character in it, a guy named John Fairfax. Has anybody in here ever heard of John Fairfax before? All right, he is a British gentleman who sailed, who became the first person to ever row across the Atlantic by himself. I came to know John Fairfax through his obituary in 2012, which was perhaps the most interesting obituary I've ever read. It had gems like, at 9, he settled a dispute with a pistol. At 13, he lit out for the Amazon jungle. It goes on in that way for some times. It's an amazing obituary. And I got interested to say, oh, well, I want to see the article then about John Fairfax rowing across the Atlantic. That sounds like it would be really interesting. So in order to do that, I searched around the New York Times at that time and landed on this page. This was our archive landing page, which presented what we had of the archive data surrounding John Fairfax, the headline, the lead paragraph, and a link to this, a PDF document that had just the contents of the article describing Mr. Fairfax's feat. And while it was interesting to read, it has two big problems because it's a PDF. One of the big problems with PDFs is, of course, they take you completely out of the context of the paper. Newspapers, as a historical artifact, aren't just a collection of articles. They are a set of items that are in conversation with one another, surrounded by advertising. So divorced of the context, the story is interesting, but it doesn't tell the whole story of the date it was published on, which happens to be July 20th, 1969. It also isn't a particularly compelling user experience. PDFs aren't so great. So what we decided to do was create an online experience that took the full context of the New York Times. And let me just key in that date. Nothing like a live demo. So it was July 20th, 1969. So this is the issue containing the story of John Fairfax. It's a lovely animation. This would be really upsetting if it doesn't work. Oh dear, I hit another link. It just needs a little encouragement. It'll work this time. Oh man. Like there's such a good payoff for this page loading too. That's the upsetting part. Well, I will just assume that it is the shoddy internet connection in this building right now that is preventing us from seeing this newspaper. And just go to the punchline. So this is the July 20th, 1969 edition of the New York Times, and John Fairfax's crossing, as you can see, is front page news. It is, however, not the lead story. The lead story is that there are currently two men about to descend to the surface of the moon, and in fact, this was the day that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first human beings to walk on the moon. It was also the day that Ted Kennedy was involved in an automobile accident that shaped the rest of his political career in a not too terribly positive way. And if you go to page 110, you can see an advertisement for a music festival that is to be held 3 weeks hence in Woodstock, New York, which has what looks to be a fairly great lineup and a coupon that you can clip out and mail in if you would like to get more information about getting tickets. So it's not that the PDF experience of the archive it wasn't that the PDF experience of the archive completely was useless, but it divorced that content from its cultural context, which really makes John Fairfax's achievement much more interesting when you learn that he landed on the day that other men landed on the moon. So the question you might have is, so that is the, did it ever actually load? I have to see. It did. All right. So I'm going to chalk that up to slowly loading internet connection. But as you can see, what we did was we took the scans of the newspaper, and we really did just put the whole newspaper online. I jokingly refer to this as our 21st century microfilm viewer. So here you have the story about John Fairfax. you can zoom in on it. You can read the text in its original context. You can also see the headline, the lead paragraph, and the other metadata. So this, in a nutshell, is Times Machine, our sort of flagship archive product, which is available now as a subscriber-exclusive product. If you subscribe to the New York Times, you get access to Times Machine. So the question then became, once we figured out how we wanted to present this content in a browser, it was, how can we make this content discoverable? How can we really give value to our users? And to do that, we decided to leverage the legacy of a product that we've produced since 1913, the New York Times Index. And the New York Times Index is an amazing product. It used to be the way you found what you were looking for in bound rag paper copies of the newspaper. It then became how you found things in microfilm, and then it became the basis of our very first digital product, the New York Times Information Bank, which was announced in 1968 and launched in 1972. And the index has always worked roughly the same way. Every day, a staff, the New York Times Index staff, the staff that still exists to this day, I'm about to be told to wrap it up, the staff of the index associates keywords with every article that we write, and then writes brief summaries of them. So essentially, we have manually tagged every single article that the Times has ever written with a controlled vocabulary of people, places, organizations, and subjects, and we've done that since 1851. So I wanted to make sure that in this archival offering, we leverage that. So when we built an archival search for Times Machine, we built a search that is like many other searches. You click on the search button, you get a search drop-down, and you can start typing. But as you can see, when you start typing, you get a list of tags. And that list of tags, it corresponds to the tags from the index, and will then filter all of the articles out based on how they were tagged from the index. You can then further refine your queries with keywords. So that's how we handle discovery. And lastly, I mentioned that we launched a Twitter account in order to help people find interesting things in our archive. That is called MIT Archives. It is full of interesting and wonderful tweets. I strongly encourage you to follow it. I just want to point out this one tweet because it's the best thing we've ever tweeted. This was a book review we found of Walden Pond, Henry David Thoreau's masterpiece. And his transcendentalist masterpiece, and it turns out the Times was not a fan of this book. It wrote, "As a contribution to the comic literature of America, Walden is worthy of some attention, but in no other respect." So you find a lot of very interesting things in the archive. And I just want to close by reiterating, and I'm sorry this was somewhat rushed, that there are really three pillars, I believe, to a successful digital archive strategy: getting distribution right, discovery right, and curation right. We've taken a crack at all three of those with Times Machine, and although I can't share specific numbers with you, we have, as a business, been gratified by the response that this product has gotten in the marketplace, and I want to thank you for your attention and leave you with this article, which covers the IPTC's first meeting held September 22nd, 1965, at which the then director concluded by saying, "We have not yet seen many marvels by television." He said, "I respectfully suggest that if these marvels are to be used to transmit the Beatles and Bonanza, then they will not be contributing much to the world's useful knowledge." How far we've come. Thank you so much.